been a fiery weekend of Israeli attacks across Iran, followed by a barrage of Iranian missiles launched at Israeli cities in retaliation. The Middle East is now witnessing a radically reshaped landscape. Both the principal players are digging in for an even bigger war. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that Israel's assault would last as many days as it takes to eliminate any nuclear threat that Iran could pose against Israel. President Donald Trump of the United States has piled on the pressure, talking in almost an apocalyptic term for Iran, saying that this would be the end of the regime if it did not accept a nuclear deal.
Iran's going to have to negotiate a little bit tougher, meaning they're going to have to give us some things that they're not willing to give us right now. We're fairly close to an agreement. We are fairly close to a pretty good agreement. It's got to be better than pretty good, though, but it's got to be, I'd much prefer an agreement. As long as I think there is an agreement, I don't want them going in, because I think that would blow it. Might help it, actually, but it also could blow it. I say this, Peter, very strongly. They can't have, whether it's going in or not going in, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I'd prefer the more friendly path.
Both men appear to be gambling. In Netanyahu's case, he's betting that Israel's barrage of attacks will fatally damage Iran's nuclear program. It will also decapitate some of its top military leadership. Trump, on the other hand, is hoping that the assault will weaken Iran and force it into a diplomatic agreement with the United States. Both leaders are making one fatally flawed assumption, and that is that this whole conflict will not spiral into unintended and potentially even catastrophic consequences. But other world leaders are not buying this optimism. Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain and President Emmanuel Macron of France both have warned of consequences that loom large. They've urged restraint, warning of ripple effects in a region that has already been at war on multiple fronts. The war in Gaza with Hamas, to the Israeli offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then, of course, the attacks against the Houthi rebels at the shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf.
Nous avons été parmi les pays les plus exigeants et les plus constants sur la question du nucléaire iranien comme du balistique iranien, mais nous avons toujours privilégié la voie de la discussion diplomatique et des exigences techniques de l'AIEA plutôt que l'intervention militaire. C'est pourquoi la France n'était pas engagée dans une discussion avec Israël sur ce sujet, et c'est pourquoi la France ne recommandait pas, a condamné depuis longtemps et à de multiples reprises l'accélération du programme nucléaire et balistique iranien. L'Iran a continué d'enrichir de l'uranium sans aucune justification civile et à des niveaux désormais très proches de ce qui est nécessaire pour un engin nucléaire, accumulant près de 40 fois plus d'uranium enrichi que ce qui lui était autorisé. Et donc je le dis avec la plus grande clarté, le risque de cette marche vers l'arme nucléaire par l'Iran menace la région, l'Europe et plus généralement la stabilité collective.
Israel's audacious attack over the weekend will almost certainly jeopardize Trump's attempts to broker a deal with Iran. The implication that Israeli attack could be a lever to soften up the Iranian leadership for further diplomacy seems far-fetched. Oil prices have spiked, stock markets have skidded as the prospect of a wider war is rattling the world. What loomed above all was the uncertainty about what comes next. Among the many questions after these strikes, will Israel be able to cripple Iran's nuclear program, particularly Fordo, which is one of the most critical uranium enrichment facilities? It is buried deep inside the side of a mountain range. Israeli fighter jets struck that site early Saturday. Iranian authorities have confirmed this to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Will the strikes also compel Iran to make a dash to further accelerate the rush towards a nuclear bomb? Presuming that Iran has the capacity still, even after these Israeli attacks on its nuclear sites and the killing of the Iranian scientists, to actually go ahead and develop a bomb. Experts warn that Iran could withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, which in turn could set off a regional nuclear arms race. Israel is not a signatory to the treaty. It has never confirmed that it possesses nuclear weapons. Will the United States be dragged into the conflict beyond what it has already done to defend Israel? If it does, will that expose American troops and American assets in a region that is already plagued by Iran and its proxies? The US has moved diplomatic personnel out of vulnerable locations like Iraq, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Will the United States be able to prevent the conflict from escalating into a region-wide war? If it does spiral, how would that affect the calculus of Russia with its ongoing war in Ukraine? And also, how would that affect the calculations of China with its hegemonic designs on Taiwan? Both these countries, Russia and China, could exploit an America that is preoccupied by yet another war in the Middle East. Trump may have calculated that this was a bargaining chip, but it is a gamble. If the US gets dragged into this war, the entire geopolitical map from Paris to Moscow to Washington to Beijing to Delhi will all change. Trump's immediate challenge would be to prevent any such escalation in the Middle East. He will have to put pressure not just on Iran, but also on Netanyahu, who has left no doubt that he sees these strikes as just an opening salvo. He wants and will get a sustained operation to extinguish any possible Iranian nuclear threat.
Tonight I wish to speak to you, the proud people of Iran. We're in the midst of one of the greatest military operations in history, Operation Rising Lion. The Islamic regime, which has oppressed you for nearly 50 years, threatens to destroy my country, the State of Israel. The objective of Israel's military operation is to remove this threat, both the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat to Israel. And as we achieve our objectives, we're also clearing the path for you to achieve your objective, which is freedom. In the past 24 hours, we've taken out top military commanders, senior nuclear scientists, the Islamic regime's most significant enrichment facility, and a large portion of its ballistic missile arsenal. More is on the way. The regime doesn't know what hit them. They don't know what will hit them.
A region-wide war could upend Trump's foreign policy agenda, which is tilted towards trade and economic competition with China. During the 2024 presidential campaign, Trump had presented himself as a peacemaker, both in Ukraine and in the Middle East. He had famously said he will end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Both those goals, ending both those wars, look much more elusive now than ever before. Trump came into office saying that the big geopolitical challenge of the time was the rivalry with China. He's now being sucked into a conflict which he did not want. It's an issue that is probably third or fourth or even fifth on his list of priorities. Persuading Israel not to strike Iran's nuclear facilities had been an article of faith among American officials. In fact, fears of an Israeli attack had peaked during the Obama administration, because Netanyahu, who was prime minister even back then, was very vocal in his opposition to the nuclear deal that Obama had negotiated with Iran. The United States now faces a reality where basically the entire region, from Saudi Arabia to UAE to Bahrain, all of them view America's closest ally, Israel, as the primary destabilizing factor in the region. Moreover, the timing of Israel's attack, it came just days before the next scheduled round of talks between Iran and Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, in Oman. In fact, that raises the risk that other countries will regard American diplomacy as merely a distraction that is intended to help Israel. Iran has refused to take part in the talks. For Iran, the stakes are no less grave or profound. Israel's wave of aerial attacks, augmented by Israeli intelligence agents operating from inside Iran, have exposed the glaring weaknesses in Iran's defenses. Iran has a weak hand to play compared to even a year ago. With Israel having decimated Hamas and Hezbollah, the Iranians would have to rely on Houthi proxies to carry out reprisal attacks against Israel. That is only one lever in the so-called axis of resistance. The other two have been fairly neutralized. Iran's choices are all bad at this stage. If it attacks oil installations in Saudi Arabia, it risks American military retaliation. If it announces plans to race towards a bomb, a nuclear bomb, it again faces retaliation both from Israel and from the United States. And from the retaliatory strikes it's carried out over Israel over the weekend, most of those were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome. Iran is literally caught between the devil and the deep sea.